sacrifice. Lord, take control, take control.
Well, thank you very much for being with me on my daily dose. I have to admit, it's been close to 2 months or better since I've taken a new one of these programs for our benefit, and I apologize for that. Things have been quite hectic around here the last several months. It was near the end of March, maybe the third or fourth week in March, that I fell ill with a stomach virus, as we call it. And that might keep you down or anyone else down. And it would have me in times past for 24 to 48 hours. But this time, because my immune system is so suppressed, I had that for 17 days. Matter of fact, I spent the majority of a 2-week period in the hospital dealing with that, and that was very, very difficult to get over. The doctors had to help me a lot with some different medications and such to try to pull me out of that. I was a pretty sick fellow there for a couple of days at least, and it was a tough time, I have to admit. But I knew God would pull me through, and He did. As a matter of fact, I believe God providentially aligned the thing the way He did, because the only 2 weeks I was free when I wasn't going to be in a pulpit during the spring and summertime was basically those 2 weeks. So I had just finished up preaching near Philadelphia, Mississippi. Got sick, fell ill that night, got admitted to UAB hospital, and for 2 weeks I wasn't supposed to be in a pulpit anywhere. And so I spent my time sick, but nevertheless, when I recovered, I was right back in the pulpit. So it's as if God allowed me to choose that time at least to be sick when I wasn't so busy, and I appreciate that. God looks out for me. I know He always has. And He's going to look out to teach me what I need to learn too while I'm at it. So I learned right then, I'm no Superman. I'm not as strong as I thought, and I could get sick like anybody else, if not more so. Fast forward a bit, however, some of the better news is that on May the 23rd, as you might remember from last year, but this year I celebrated my 1-year anniversary as a heart transplant patient. That's a wonderful thing, especially because during the period of this year, I've had no rejection, no infection, and no difficulty with my medications. Everything's been just perfect as far as that goes. And so I'm very, very blessed. That's perhaps even unheard of among transplant patients. Typically, they predict you're going to have some form of rejection inside of the first year. You're going to encounter those infections, and the medications are going to be all over the map. But mine has been very, very well taken care of. I've had no issues, no problem. Of course, much of that I know results to what God did in choosing me a donor. And that's just the fact that my match is a very good match, and so I was able to really survive probably better than most thus far. And I continue to pray each day that I'll continue in that way if that's God's will, and I'll be able to continue to preach. That's what I desire to do. However, in the intermediate of that, before I was going to actually have my heart caths, and there's a left and a right and a biopsy that go on in one day, in the intermediate of preparing for that, they did find a spot on my left lung. Now, that took me from going into the doctor that day kind of casually, drove myself in, was planning on coming home that evening and doing some things with the family, but to being immediately admitted to the hospital. And they wanted to know what this was on my lungs. They did x-rays and CAT scans and other tests and blood work, and they finally concluded I have some sort of a fungus in my left lung. Now, that's not something that's contagious, not something that you would probably even catch, most of us anyway. It's just something when you're on all these immune suppressants that keep you from being able to fight off many things, diseases, bacteria, viruses, and such, something that I'm more susceptible to than the next person. And so I got it basically from the water or the soil. So you can't get away from that. But I picked that up, and it could have been very, very bad. Matter of fact, when they caught it, I had absolutely no symptoms. That was a blessing. I had no idea I was sick. So I didn't have to suffer through anything. And it turns out it hadn't gone, as it potentially could have, to my spinal fluid or my brain. And so it wasn't very dangerous in that perspective. But it's going to take about 6 to 12 months of antibiotics to clear it up. It's kind of hard to get rid of, and so I'm going to have to deal with that for 6 to 12 months. But the doctors had me on the antibiotics. I'm doing very well. Again, I've experienced no symptoms. I feel fine. I feel great. So I've been able to preach. And I'm very, very blessed in that area. I've been in so many congregations thus far this year where I've never been before, where I've gotten to meet new people, find new faces and such as that, and meet new precious souls of Christ, and that's always a great joy. I do the best work and most wonderful work in the world because I'm a gospel preacher, but more so, I'm what I call or consider a circuit rider. I get to go from place to place to place, speak on one-day events, gospel meetings, many of them and such, and that is a true blessing. To go in and meet new faces. At the same time, I've also this year been able to go back into many congregations I've been in the past. So I was able not only to meet new people, but to renew old friendships through that. And it's always a blessing. Several of the congregations in the area, by their own word, have made me their permanent fill-in. So if their preacher's gone or out of town or such as that, they need something, I'm kind of the guy that they call, and I appreciate that. God really has opened doors for me in so many areas. I cannot thank him enough for that. Again, I'm so blessed, and he deserves all the glory for that. I don't deserve what I get, but I appreciate what I get, and so I'm so thankful for that. So if I'm ever in your area, preaching in your area, I hope that we can cross paths in person, hope that we can meet, and I look forward to being in your area because I am traveling an awful lot, and eventually we'll probably cross paths if God wills that to happen. So thank you very much for viewing the program, for supporting me in those ways and such as that. Again, I continue to praise God and that I've been so blessed health-wise since back last May 23rd. And so we're going on a year and several weeks, and I plan to go on several more years or decades from that point. Now, to moving into more spiritually minded things, I have the wonderful opportunity on Wednesday night, just a few days from now, to be able to preach at the Aniana Church of Christ. I'm familiar with them and their preacher. I've been there and spoken several times before, and look forward to that again this Wednesday night. But they're involved in a summer series, and that's just where you have various speakers throughout the summer on selected topics that you present to a congregation so they may learn or maybe expand their view of the Bible a little bit more. And the topic they're studying, as my understanding is, what's right with the church. And the subheading I was given in that is what's right with the church and what we teach our youth. Now, I'll admit, when I received the topic, I thought to myself, I don't know what to do with that. I'm not exactly sure where to go. There's so much that we need to be teaching our youth. There are hundreds or thousands of things our youth need to know. And in general, they need to know the whole of the Bible. But it really got me thinking. It really got me thinking about our duty as older people, as adults, that we are absolutely certain or sure that we're teaching our youth just what they need to know. Let me show you a couple of verses from the book of Psalm. It's in Psalm 71 and verse number 5 to begin with. Notice what the psalmist says here. He says, "For thou art my hope, O Lord God. Thou art my trust from my youth." Now, if David be the writer of this psalm, and I believe that he is, he didn't write them all, but I believe he wrote this one. If that's the case, we know David's telling the truth. David, as a young boy, remember when he went in to defeat Goliath just prior to that, he had already admitted or confessed to those men who were around him, the armies, and even Saul, that I can take this man. Why is that? Because I trust God. I trusted God when I was able to slay, by his example, a lion and a bear, and I trust God to allow me to slay this giant. Of course, David knew the power wasn't everywhere in him. David knew that without God, that was an impossibility. But it shows us that he trusted God. Now drop down to verse 17, Psalm 71 and verse 17. Here's what he says there. He says, "O God, thou hast taught me from my youth." Now watch what he goes on to do. "Thou hast taught me from my youth, and hitherunto I have declared thy wondrous works." Now friends, that's special. What David says here is, I trusted God, verse 5. And all my life, from my youth, I've trusted God. But now, because of the youth that I had, I'm willing to declare his wondrous works. Friends, there's no better thing we can teach our young people than to have such a great love for God that they're not only obedient and willing to follow it and be faithful to it themselves, but instill within them the willingness, the ability to also want to teach others about God. That's how the church is going to continue in any given area. Now, certainly it's the case that Jesus taught that his word and his church and such as that, those things are going to stand. They're going to be there in existence in some form, some fashion, somewhere until he returns. But at the same time, the church which you worship in, especially if it be a church of Christ, of course, that's the only body that Christ built, the only church that he built, that church doesn't have to exist in your area. That congregation could easily fall, could easily fail. And although God would be disappointed and man would be disgruntled by that, at the same time, the survival of it is going to be based upon what we teach the coming generations. Making sure that they learn themselves, and likewise that they're willing to teach or declare the wondrous works of God. So friends, let me encourage you today. Take time, find someone who is young. I don't mean you have to find a teenager, 8 or 10 or 12-year-old. I mean, find someone who's younger than you. So if you're 80 years old, find a 79-year-old. If you're 50 years old, find a 49-year-old. If you're 18, find a 17-year-old. Find someone younger than you and help to instill within them the love and trust of God. And call upon them that when they love and trust God and obey him fully in their lives, throughout their lives, that they'll be willing also to declare his wonderful works. This has been your Daily Dose, and I pray that you'll be encouraged.